Families First Act its goal was essentially to provide paid leave to employees who are unable to come to work due to COVID-19. So what it did was it created an emergency paid sick leave law, and then an expanded Family and Medical Leave Act law. So under the emergency paid sick leave law, employees, and that includes part-time employees as well as full-time employees, can get up to 80 hours if they're full-time of emergency paid sick leave if they are out of work because they have COVID-19, because they're subject to a quarantine order, or like a stay-at-home order, if they think that they have COVID-19 and are seeking a medical diagnosis, if they're caring for someone who has COVID-19 or is subject to a quarantine order, or if they're at home caring for their child whose school is closed due to COVID-19. So those are the reasons that an employee can potentially qualify for the emergency paid sick leave. Then there's the expansion of the Family and Medical Leave Act, which provides for up to 10 weeks of paid leave. However, that leave is only available to employees who are unable to work because they're at home caring for a child. Now, a couple important things to note about these laws is that the employee has to be unable to work or telework. So if an employee can work from home, even though that employee might also be caring for a child, then he or she would not qualify for the leave. The Department of Labor, that's the government entity in charge of enforcing these laws, has also said an employee could potentially have COVID-19 and still not qualify for the leave. If they're experiencing mild or no symptoms, that employee could still potentially work. So just because you have COVID-19 or you have a kid whose child is you have a kid who's at home doesn't necessarily mean that you qualify for the leave. Now, this law only applies to employers with fewer than 500 employees, and then there's also a potential small business exemption for employers with fewer than 50 employees. So those are the highlights of the Families First Act.
And Kierstin, so we've got a question. Does the Families First leave apply to contract workers?
No, it does not apply to contract workers.
Okay. We've got some unemployment questions. Why don't you go over unemployment with us real quick?
Yep. So the CARES Act, which we're going to, I guess, talk about now. One part of the CARES Act was an expansion of unemployment benefits. So it did that in a couple ways. It expanded the amount of unemployment benefits that people can get. It expanded how long individuals can get unemployment, and it expanded who qualifies for unemployment. So really what we've been getting a lot of questions on is who can apply for unemployment. So under the CARES Act, what it did was allow for independent contractors and those who are self-employed, single member LLCs, people like that can now apply for unemployment, whereas typically they were not eligible to do so. And then the other thing you've probably heard a lot about is that $600 extra payment, which is available through July 31st. So in addition to the amount you might get from Tennessee in unemployment, which is capped at $275 per week, individuals will also potentially and probably qualify for a $600 per week unemployment benefit. Now, it's important to note that this is income that you have to pay taxes on. So it's not just going to be $600 in your pocket. You can elect to have those taxes withheld on the front end, or you can deal with it later, but you will have to pay income tax on that $600.
I think that's an important point. You need to make sure if you're drawing unemployment, you need to set that money aside. It sounds like, it's really easy to say this is a pandemic and, I can make that up later. But I find that it's difficult to suddenly find 20% of your income or whatever your tax rate is. So set it aside now so that you don't get behind, because unless somebody forgives taxes, and there's been no talk about that, you're going to have to pay it. So a question came in, Kierstin. Someone has applied for unemployment. It doesn't say how long ago, but when can folks start expect to seeing that extra $600 a week? Because I haven't heard of anyone who's gotten a check.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone who has gotten a $600 check, and I don't have a answer to that. I don't know anyone who does at this point. So the way that the CARES Act, and here's why, the way the CARES Act works is the federal government is giving the money to the states, and then the states are then giving the money to the citizens. So the state doesn't have the money yet. The state has to figure out how it's getting the money and how much money each state is getting from the federal government. When it can figure that out, then it can start giving people those checks. So there's a lot of logistics in this, a lot of, just unprecedented procedure that these government agencies are trying to work through right now, on top of having employees who are unable to work, who are out on leave, isolation order, all of that. So it could be a while, but you want to apply now, because if you became unemployed a month ago and you don't apply until today, you don't get those 4 weeks. It's not going to be, back date. So you want to apply now.
So someone asked, does the sum of $275 and $600 come from the same application, or is there a separate application?
It'll come from the same application. So if you've already applied as well, and then you qualify for that $600, you don't have to reapply. And it will probably come at the same time as your, $275 or whatever you're getting from Tennessee. The law is set up to allow another state agency, to issue that $600. So for instance, if Tennessee, the Tennessee Department Unemployment Office was overwhelmed, they could sort of delegate that $600 function to another less busy state department. But it's more than likely going to come from the Tennessee Unemployment Office at the same time as that other check.
All right, so someone has asked, their museum closed and all the full-time staff were moved to part-time, but of course the museum's closed, and so this employee has not had any hours scheduled since mid-March and probably won't until the museum reopens. Do I qualify for unemployment under the new changes?
Potentially. So the federal government has incentivized states to offer unemployment to people with reduced hours or who have been furloughed. So I would definitely apply, and it'll ask you to disclose your income, your last day worked, make sure you have that day that you actually worked, and put that in there and submit the application.
All right, let me clarify something, because I've gotten a couple of questions on this. If you have already applied for unemployment in Tennessee, you do not need to take any additional action to receive the $600. You may not get it right away, but if you've applied for unemployment, you qualify for the $600. As soon as the state starts administering those $600 payments, you should receive it. That's the best guidance we have right now. Let me say one thing to everyone. The laws and the way that all this stuff is actually happening is changing. And so what we're telling you today might be different. In fact, what we're telling you today at 9 may be completely different than what we tell you today at 5 p.m. If you're reading things online about Families First or CARES Act, I encourage you to look at the date of whatever that posting is, whether it's a newspaper article or a law firm blog or social media. Look at the date. What I said last week is probably not accurate. What we're saying today will probably change. Like I said, maybe even by 5 o'clock today. Let's see if we've got any more employment or Families First questions.
And I'm finding this link that I took down yesterday, and I'm gonna paste it into the chat. What it is that Tennessee.gov finally put up sort of like a FAQ how-to page for individuals who are self-employed, how they can apply for unemployment and how they should answer specific questions. I think it's really helpful. So I'm going to post that in the chat for people. There
Okay.
it is.
So we've got a 1099 employee who's asked, I've been told to go ahead and apply for unemployment, get rejected, and then file a wage dispute. Is that correct, Kierstin, for a 1099?
1099 should be able to apply through the system now. The Tennessee.gov website implies that it is functioning because this FAQ that I just posted walks individuals who are self-employed through how to apply. So I think that they can now. So I would try to actually get through and submit the application.
All right. So Kierstin, thanks so much for talking to us. I appreciate everybody submitting questions. We're going to move on to the CARES Act. Kierstin's going to drop off. She's got paying work to do now. Thank you again, Kierstin. So on the CARES Act and the loan pieces of it, Mason, why don't you tell us a little bit? So we've got two different things. There's the economic injury disaster loans, and there's the Paycheck Protection Program. And you can apply for both, and they're kind of confusing. Why don't you give us sort of a high-level summary, and then we can talk some specifics, okay?
Yeah, so the EIDL, that came out first, and that's this SBA is very used to doing disaster loans, but they were more accustomed to doing like infrastructure building disaster loans. So this is kind of a little bit of a new product that they're working with. But there is a application directly on the SBA.gov website that you apply directly with the SBA. You don't go through any bank. The money's going to come directly through the SBA with the EIDL. They were promising up to a $10,000 advance for every successful or denied application. And everybody thought they were going to get immediate $10,000, but there's been some clarification. It seems like they're going to do $1,000 per employee. So on that form, you report the number of employees that you have. And there's been some questions if you're a Schedule C filer and you don't actually have any employees, but you make your living through the business. It seems like you can put a one employee there if you're the only, you're a single member owner of the business. But
Mason, I'm going to try to interject in here some.
Sure.
So my experience on the EIDL and the $10,000, the law says $10,000. The SBA, the best guess that folks have is that the SBA knows they're not going to have enough money.
Mm-hmm.
So they are essentially rationing that payment. The $1,000 an employee is completely arbitrary. I don't know if Congress will change that when Congress funds more of the CARES Act of the Paycheck Protection Program, but stay tuned on that issue. You're supposed to get your check within 3 days. I've heard one person say they've gotten a check. And some people have had applications in the system for weeks now. So it's not good news on that. Mason, keep it going, all right?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So that's with the EIDL. And then, so after you get that advance, which is not supposed to be paid back, it's essentially a grant. They're not calling it a grant, but it's a loan that you don't have to pay back. Then you would be connected with a loan officer directly with the SBA to apply for additional loan money. And that would be a traditional loan, 30 years, 3.75%. It's supposed to be used for business expenses, but it doesn't have to be just payroll. It can be rent or utilities or anything business related, but it will convert to a loan that you will make payments to the SBA. And so you have to apply through this COVID-19 relief website. It's a kind of streamlined application. And then you'll be connected with a loan officer. And Will's right, I haven't heard of anyone. We're working with probably about 300 businesses, and none of them have received any of the advance money yet. And some of them were filing on the first day. So that 3-day, promise didn't get didn't get met. But hopefully the advance will start rolling out here pretty soon, and then the additional loans will come up after that.
Right. That's 3 dog days, I think, in government time.
Yeah, right.
So just a high level summary. I'm seeing a lot of questions. You go to the SBA website. There's actually a description of the link on our slide here.
Mm-hmm.
It is a loan. The loan is not forgivable, but there is the up to $10,000 emergency loan advance that does not need to be repaid. The loan has very favorable terms. Mason, what's the repayment terms again and the interest rate?
It'll be 30 years at 3.75. I think
good.
it's a little different for nonprofits. Might be 3.25 for nonprofits, but for businesses, it's 3.75.
Is there a personal guarantee or any pledge of assets?
They're waiving the collateral. When I was talking to the SBA, they were going to do anything over $25,000. They were going to require collateral, but they're waiving that at this time, and they're going to, I think, handle it case by case.
So a couple of people have asked, when they're applying for the EIDL loans, someone told them to put 0 employees since they're self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
That means they get 0 money. So if you are actually self-employed, meaning that you pay yourself salary as opposed to taking a draw. So if you're a single member LLC, for example, and you pay yourself salary, you should put 1 in there so you can at least get $1,000. Is that what you're thinking, Mason?
That's what I would think. We're hoping that we're going to get some guidance and clarification on that. That's been a very popular question because a lot of our businesses are single member LLCs and they just make their living. They're not technically employees of the business, but the law says that they're supposed to be able to apply. So we're telling them to put 1, at least 1 in that box if they're a business owner.
So how about sole proprietors? Can sole proprietors apply for EIDL?
Yes, they should be able to apply for EIDL as well. So most sole proprietors file a Schedule C. So I would have that tax document handy for 2018 or 2019. But because when it comes into applying for the loan, so you don't need a lot of tax documentation to do this $10,000 advance application. But then once you start talking to an SBA loan officer, you're going to have to submit some tax documents to apply for a larger loan amount.
So if I'm a sole proprietor, the number of employees, I enter 1 there, or how does that work?
Yeah, so sole proprietors can have employees too. So if you are employing other people, you need to use, whatever number of employees that you've got. Now there's a difference between like a 1099 worker and a true employee. So we need to flesh that out. But I'm assuming this person is sole proprietor and they're not actually hiring any employees, but they're the business owner and they make their living through this business. So I would advise to put 1, but we are hoping to get clarifying guidance from the SBA on that question.
All right. So how do you reapply if you mess the application up?
So when you submit the application, you're supposed to be given an application number through an email. They've had some issues with their website. So some people didn't get that application number and needed to reapply. There is a 1-800 number that you can call to check the status of your application. And they're manning that number 7 days a week, 24 hours. So you could call and check the status, but if you got an application number, then you should be in the system. But very few, if any, people have actually gotten money yet.
So a lot of folks are asking this. I was an employee. Let's say I work part-time for a nonprofit arts group. I'm also a musician. I do a lot of 1099 gigs. So can I draw unemployment because I've been laid off from my regular job and also apply for an EIDL? And I think the answer is yes, right, Mason?
I would believe you can. And like you can have separate legal entities, like you can have multiple, entities that you file as a sole proprietor, and you're able to file for the EIDL under each of those entities.
All right. So we've got a second here. We're using a lot of acronyms. So EIDL is a loan program. The purpose of the loan is because your business has been hurt by COVID. Mason, what can I use idle money for?
So you can use it for any business-related expense. And which is a pretty broad term, but it doesn't just have to be payroll. It can be payroll, but there's more flexibility in this loan than the PPP loan, which we'll talk about later.
All right. So folks are asking, can I apply for idle and PPP? And the answer is both. You just can't use the money for the same thing. Let's go over this other acronym, the Paycheck Protection Program. Tell us a little bit about that, Mason.
All right. So the PPP program came out after the disaster loan program. And this is geared towards payroll. So 75% of the money that you receive through this program is supposed to be spent on paying employees. So if you hire employees, it needs to be going to them. If you're a single member LLC, and like we talked about before, we're still looking for guidance on that, but you're supposed to be able to apply for this program too. We just need understanding on how you calculate what the payroll is for you as the business owner. But it's for small businesses. You had to have been in operation as of February 15th of 2020. So if you started after that, then you wouldn't apply. But if you started January 1st, you would still be eligible. So I said 75% has to be on payroll. 25% can be spent on the interest of mortgage, rent, utilities, interest on other debts, but to be forgiven. So you can use it for other purposes, but what you don't use on payroll or those other allowed expenses would turn into a loan that would be paid back over 2 years at 1%.
So let me give a little high level legal bit.
Mm-hmm.
So PPP is a loan that you apply for. It's based on your employment, including benefits, bonuses, Social Security, the employee withholding. You take that number, and that's the amount that you apply for the loan. Once you're granted the PPP loan, then you're supposed to use 75% of that loan for payroll. And you're asking, who do I pay? I've got nobody working right now.
Mm-hmm.
You bring everybody back. I'm putting quotes around bring everybody back. I look like Bernie Sanders there, sorry. You bring everybody back. They don't have to actually work. You can pay them not to work, but you must use 75% of the money to pay your staff. And that can be benefits and everything. And that's for 8 weeks from the time that you get the money, you pay your staff. So if you have furloughed staff, you bring them back, you pay them. Hopefully you can find something for them to do. Maybe they're working for free now and they'll suddenly be working for money. The idea of PPP is that rather than write checks from the government to individuals, this is a way to give hope to businesses that they're going to survive through June 30th. And it gives businesses the money to be able to pay their employees, which the thought is that that's a lot better than the government writing a bunch of assistance checks, because then you have nothing to look forward to, no future, no job. So if you pay at least 75% of the loan towards your payroll, and then you use the rest of the money for allowable expenses like utilities, rent, interest on your mortgage, not principal, just interest. If you use the money for those purposes, you apply for a grant essentially, and that loan is forgiven. It's free money. And that's why it's so attractive to even bigger businesses. It's up to 500 employees. If you qualify for a PPP, get the application in. The process is not working smoothly, but when the money comes, it'll be a huge benefit, because if you use the money the way you're supposed to, and you document that, it's a grant. The government just gave you 2 months to pay your staff, even if they're not working. Did I miss anything there, Mason?
Yeah, just to clarify, you're applying for this money through a bank that is not directly through the SBA. And then the way you calculate the amount that you can borrow is an average month times 2.5. So for salary, for wages. So take your payroll cost for an average month multiply by 2.5. That's the maximum amount that you can apply for. And you have to work through an approved bank that's part of this program.
Right. So, and then people mix these things up. The $10,000 under the EIDL loan is completely different. You can
Yes.
apply for both.
Yes.
So keep it, so you multiply your average 2019 payroll costs for employees up to $10,000 in salary per employee. You take that amount times 2.5, you do not include independent contractors. There are many more details. And if you've got questions about how to file a PPP loan, my law firm's website has guidance. Once again, look for the most recent guidance if you're getting guidance. And Mason's right. That is an application that you file preferably with your bank. And if you haven't already done it, get your stuff together and get it in. Independent contractors can apply starting today. Unfortunately, the SBA gave no guidance. And so no one knows what the rules are for an independent contractor applying for a PPP loan. And Mason would love to take your application, but he doesn't know what to look for right now, right, Mason?
Yeah, that's right. And to clarify, Pathway is not participating in this program, but we are helping people apply for the loan through a financial institution that is part of the program. But Will's right. We are still waiting for guidance on independent contractors. One caveat: an independent contractor does not count as an employee if you're applying for this for your business. So the independent contractors are going to apply themselves, but you can't include whatever you paid them as part of your business application.
Yeah, so once again, if you go to your bank that you're currently banking with, you probably will get better service.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Pinnacle is processing PPP loans, First Horizon,
Mm-hmm.
SunTrust. So there are other banks that are out there doing it. My suggestion is if you can get in touch with a banker, move your money, and you're suddenly a customer of a bank that can help you. And let's see. So what's your best guess about how an independent contractor should apply? I know there's a lot of questions since you don't have the guidance, but Mason,
Right.
what's your best guess about how to work? And this is just Mason's guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of banks are going ahead and taking the information from independent contractors because they were promised that this would be allowed starting today, but they were also under the impression we'd get a little more guidance. So the big question seems to be, I'm an independent contractor, and I file a Schedule C. What do I count as my salary? Because there's not really a place on your tax form to report your salary. And the reason other types of businesses have been able to apply is because you can actually report you can become an employee of a business that you own and report your salary there. Or you can take out guaranteed payments, which is a line item on your tax return. So that's what those tax filers are doing. But with Schedule C filers, independent contractors that then file a Schedule C, the question seems to be, do I count, is it going to be my net income, which would be your revenue minus all your expenses, and it's line 31. That's my impression that what they're going to take. But some people are saying, well, I take a draw from my business. Can I use that as my income? That's possible that that's what they'll come up with, but that's a harder number to verify. So I think they're going to look for a number that they can tie back to some kind of tax filing document.
And I think a key thing to do right now, if you're an independent contractor and you're wanting to apply, is go ahead and get your records together.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need tax records, most likely are going to be required to show how much your draw is or whatever you paid yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure your fingers are on your tax return from last year. If you don't have last year, have 2018. And then also bank statements that show a deposit are helpful. If you've got anything that if you paid yourself in a way that's got a paper trail, have that available. That's the best advice I could say right now. Is there anything else that, Mason, that I could be setting aside and waiting until I can apply?
Payroll tax returns like the 940s, 941. If you have self-employment tax returns, and so just to clarify, the SBA is not holding the bank, they're holding the banks harmless. So they're wanting to get this money out. So the banks have a little bit more liberty, and they don't have to verify the application is correct. But if there's suspicion of, wrongdoing, the SBA will come after the borrower. So, you as the borrower need to make sure that you're applying for this correctly. And I'm hoping that the banks are working with the borrowers and, trying to guide them along. But the banks are kind of overwhelmed with so many applications. So they're kind of putting it on the borrower to make sure that they're submitting this information and filling out the paperwork appropriately.
So Mason, I'm an independent contractor and I want to apply, but I have really crummy credit. What should I do?
So with the EIDL loan, they did have a cap. I think it was like 650 credit score or below. They were just flat denying everybody. I think they've loosened that a little bit. I don't think they have a minimum floor, but that's a consideration.
Under the Paycheck Protection Program.
I haven't heard of a floor on the PPP at all.
My understanding is that there is absolutely no credit worthiness required under the PPP. It's not part of what the bank is looking for. That's my understanding too. So yeah. If I have crummy credit, I definitely should apply. If I qualify for PPP, I'd apply for it, right?
Yeah, I'd apply for both, no matter what your credit score is. But I have heard the SBA was looking at credit under the EIDL.
Okay, let's see. So under the EIDL, someone asked, can we use our 2018 tax return numbers?
So most people haven't filed their 2019 and they extended the deadline. I think the SBA knows that. So I would try to use 2019 numbers because 2018 is just kind of, but if that's all you have to go with, I would, you can use it, but try to look at your 2019 and see if it's going to be that much different than your 2018. The big test is going to be how you use these funds. So I think the way you apply, how you calculate your payroll, they may be a little more liberal on that, but they're going to really crack down on how you pay, what you use these funds for. So make sure you're keeping good records on how you use the funds once you actually get the loan.
And I think that's good advice, Mason. So if you are granted a PPP, you need to make sure that you very carefully document the money, how you spend that money. And documenting it is how you're going to convert it from a loan to a grant. If you can't document it, that you use the money in compliance with the PPP, then you're probably stuck with a loan. Now the loan's on favorable terms too, Mason. Remind me, what are those payment terms?
Yeah, so right now it's 2 years at 1% interest. So that's still a really good loan. But
beats the crap out of my credit card at 18%, right?
Right, yeah. And the EIDL loan at 30 years that's really good terms too. But yeah, I would apply for both. You don't have to accept it either. Like if things are in a better situation by the time everything of the money starts flowing, and you don't want to accept the money, you don't have to accept it, but at least apply.
So there's a tax question here, and I don't speak tax. I can barely spell tax. Any idea how they will determine loan forgiveness for the independent contractor / sole proprietor who is borrowing under PPP? Is that going to be based on their Schedule C, line 31, or pre-tax net? And here's my sort of gut instinct. Knowing what we know about how it works for employers who have employees, the PPP applies to your gross payroll, which is your salary, benefits, bonuses, health insurance, employee withholdings, Social Security, up to $100,000 per employee. So if that logic applies to an independent contractor, it's going to be the same calculation, but we do not know right now. Mason, is that your best guess too?
Yeah, and just to clarify, the independent contractor, it's not just the amount that you receive in, but you've got expenses, or most independent contractors have expenses related to whatever business or whatever service that they're providing. So it'll be, what you bring in minus the expenses that you report.
So I think the expenses are going to be kind of tricky here, and I don't know what the government's going to do with this. For example, rent, interest on your mortgage, utilities. If I'm an independent contractor and I work from home normally, nobody said that you could pay your home mortgage.
Right. Yeah, we've had a lot of people ask if they can use the interest that they pay on their home mortgage, because it does say, and if they have a true home office, and you report that you have a home office on your tax return, and you report expenses related to that, I could see the government allowing that, but we don't have clear guidance on that.
We have absolutely no guidance on that. So someone has asked a question of if I'm a sole proprietor, independent contractor that's borrowing under PPP, and I pay myself and I comply with the PPP guidelines, it's going to be forgiven. That's my understanding. Mason, what is your?
Yeah, that's the intent, and that's the way the law was written. It's just the details of how that gets applied. The big question is, what do I count as my salary? A lot of owners, they don't take a standard draw each month. They just kind of use whatever's left over, and it's not really reported anywhere other than the net income of the business. So I still think they're going to come back to that net income of your business.
So here's a really good question: royalties. So I have absolutely no idea. I think a royalty is viewed as passive income. So I know under the existing guidance, there's a list of income that's excluded for employers, and passive income is excluded. So, for example, if you own 3 residential real estate properties, 3 houses in Nashville, and you Airbnb them, most likely that income is not counted towards PPP. Royalties are also passive income. There's a list of things that are excluded, and if anybody who receives royalty income as an independent contractor, if you want to go look, the SBA has guidance on what you can and can't include under PPP. I would look at that and see. Mason, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I concur with you. I have seen the passive income has been excluded.
So someone's asked a question. I have a new project-based company, and we just landed our first gig scheduled to begin this month. This person has continued to freelance while trying to get the company off the ground. So terrible time to launch a company, obviously. It's not begun to generate any income yet. Is an EIDL loan something that would be available to my new company?
With the EIDL loan, I think you needed to have a legal business by the end of January of 2020. So if you had a legal entity as of January 31st of 2020, it seems like you're still able to apply. But they'll probably handle that case by case. If you don't have any income to report, then it's probably going to be hard to get access.
Someone asked, what constitutes a legal entity? So for purposes of EIDL, can a sole proprietor file, somebody who doesn't have an LLC or a corporation?
Well, they need to have a business license. You need to file with, whatever jurisdiction you live in, and make sure you have a business license and that you are reporting as a business entity.
So, for example, I work out of my home and I mix music, I produce music. I didn't pull a business license. I'm probably not going to qualify, right?
Probably not. Yeah. I know a lot of people have income that doesn't get reported, but if you're not reporting income under a legal entity, then it's probably going to be hard for you to apply for either.
So I know a lot of folks that are real estate agents, and they receive commission income. Consultants also have commission income. How's that going to be handled under the PPP?
For commission income, I have seen real estate agents, I believe, are eligible to apply, and that commission income gets reported through whatever entity you've got set up. So I would say real estate agents would be able to apply, and your commission income is not technically passive.
So you probably receive, if I'm a real estate agent at Village, I probably receive statements that indicate my commission income from Village.
Yeah.
So that's an example of documentation that I'd want to have on file so that when I apply, I can show how much commission income I've received.
Right. Yeah, documentation is going to be key here.
What's the time period that I'm going to need documentation of income?
So the PPP they're taking applications through the end of June, and then it's supposed to be 8 weeks after you get them, after you receive the funds, the money's supposed to be spent within 8 weeks. So depending on when you receive it, and then look at 8 weeks later, you want that time frame to have documentation of how you spent the funds.
So someone had a good question. They said, so my tax return as sole proprietor doesn't count even though I don't have a business license. So once again, there's two different programs here we're talking about. One is an EIDL loan, it's a disaster loan. And on that one, you have to have a business. And what Mason was saying, if you don't have a business license, you're probably not going to be able to apply. Under the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, sole proprietors can apply. So if you have 1099 income, if you're a musician who plays around town and has a lot of different gigs, you may not qualify for an EIDL loan, but you should go ahead and apply for PPP. Is that right, Mason?
Yeah, and I would apply for both. I mean, they might turn you down, but because I do think they're going to require you to have a business license to show that you have a legal entity. But if you're a sole proprietor and you're filing a Schedule C without a business license, I guess they can consider that documentation. But yeah, I would say having a business license might be one of the criteria that they look for.
And let me just say that things change. Once again, tomorrow or even this afternoon at 5 o'clock, we may give you different advice. And so if you don't have a business license, I think Mason's advice is good. Go ahead and get your EIDL loan in. The application is incredibly easy. All you have to do is get the supporting documentation in, complete the application, press submit, and you legally qualify for whatever share of the $10,000 the government ultimately determines you're going to be available. If these programs have been, I mean, part of the problem is that the programs are enormously successful. And so, and that creates a problem because there's so much demand that the systems are overwhelmed. My best guess is that as soon as Congress can figure out what they want to fund, which of these programs they want to fund, the federal government will print some more money and put more money in the systems, and these payments will start coming through. It may be later than you want, but go ahead and get your application in, have it going on both EIDL and PPP. One thing to be very careful about, Mason touched on this, the banks have relaxed criteria for reviewing these applications. And the banks have essentially been told by the federal government, absent some sort of fraud on the part of the bank, if the bank misses something and someone's not qualified, or they've more importantly, they've submitted fraudulent documentation, the bank is not going to be on the hook like they normally are. So the way an SBA loan works for a bank is that the federal government, if the bank demonstrates that the lender qualifies for an SBA loan, the federal government guarantees that loan, and so the bank has significantly less risk. If the bank doesn't have that SBA guarantee, then it's the bank's risk, and they have higher due diligence, and they typically charge a higher interest rate because there's more risk. Mason, that's right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But usually banks have a little more time to review the application, and they're not overloaded with so many at the same time. that the government's trying to relax that verification process.
So let me say, back on the loan application, not understanding what you need to file is completely understandable. Filing false documentation or knowing that you are cheating the system could be a crime. There's a watchdog component under CARES, and no one wants to be playing golf in a federal prison. So it's one thing to be confused about all of this, but do not falsify your application. And tell people to be very careful about that. So let's see. Someone asked if there's any time frame on when people are being contacted or receiving money. So I know under EIDL, Mason and I we've heard of no one who's received any money under EIDL. I know of a number of people that have applied, they've gotten a number, a loan number, but nobody's received any money. On the PPP, I also don't know anyone who's been approved. I talked to a large arts group yesterday. They submitted their application on the first day in the evening, Friday evening. It was acknowledged by their lender. Their lender is a large regional bank, and they were assigned number 85,000, and that's applying on Friday. So that's a week, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And they still have not heard back from their lender saying that the lender has reviewed the supporting documentation and approved it to the SBA. So this process is going to take longer than anyone wants it to, but keep in mind, PPP, if you qualify for the money and then you use the money for your payroll or your individual pay, and the rest of it goes to allowable expenses like rent, mortgage interest, utilities. If you use the money the way it's supposed to be used, it's free money. So even if it's late, apply and get your free money. EIDL is a loan that has a payment up front that's also free money, but it's a loan on very favorable terms. So let's see.
Just to clear, I have heard some banks have approved some PPP applications. I'm not aware of any that have actually submitted funds to business owners. And there's an application process that the bank has to go through with the SBA. So once they get all your paperwork and the application, they then have to turn that into an SBA submission form. And it seems like that's where the holdup has been, because the SBA has to approve the application before they're going to allow the bank to release the funds. But we have had several clients get approved. A handful of clients actually get approved, but not actually receive money.
So someone asks, they've filed for an EIDL loan as a small business, as an LLC, but they listed 0 employees because they're the only employee. Should they go back and amend their application, refile? How does that work?
I would refile. There's a 1-800 number that you can call and talk to a person, and as long as you have an application number, they might be able to give you better advice. But my advice has been just reapply.
Okay, and someone has a good question here, and this is probably applies to lots of sole proprietors. So my work has decreased. There's a surprise, right? But you're still doing some work from home, still making some money. Can you still apply for PPP?
Yeah, absolutely. They're looking at what you're going to use is a normal 12-month period of payroll. Divide that by 12, so you get your average 1 month of payroll. Multiply that by 2.5, and that's the amount that you can apply for. So they're not really looking at what your current income is. They're looking at what it was like before the outbreak.
Yeah, and remember, the PPP is money that's a loan that's converted to a grant to pay, if you're an independent contractor, to pay yourself. It is free money. It's two months. It's a grant from the government if you use the money right. So go ahead and get your application in. If your work is decreased and you still have some income, make sure you're using the income that's coming in for other expenses, because your PPP, you absolutely have to document that you use the money in the right way. The right way is to pay your salary, benefits, and other allowable expenses. So the fact that you've got a little bit of money coming in doesn't mean you're not qualified for the PPP. You just have to use the money from the PPP the proper way.
Right. And what you don't use it for will convert to a 2-year loan. What you don't use it for payroll or an allowable expense will convert to a loan.
Mason, I know last week we had this question and nobody really knew. So if I get a PPP, should I set up a separate account, bank account, so I can track that money and what I spend it on? So that because, you know, if I'm a sole proprietor and I've got one checking account and everything goes through it, you know, my payment to the dog groomer, you know, and my NES for my home, should I open a separate bank account to track this better?
Well, we advise business owners to have a separate bank account for business expenses and personal expenses. So it depends on how good your accounting system is, and if you've got an accounting system like QuickBooks, I feel like, and a separate business account that you're using business expenses for, I think we can keep everything separate. But if you've got everything mixed and it's personal and business expenses, it might be time to open up a business account and put that PPP money in that, and then start using that as your business account. I don't think it's a requirement, but it's probably good accounting practice to do.
Yeah, Mason, I think that's really good advice. So to all those, you know, folks out there, I'm the musician that does pickup gigs around town. Go ahead and open that separate bank account and run your business expenses through it. And I would be careful about what you consider to be a business expense on that account, knowing that if you get the PPP money, you're going to have to document that you use the money properly. And so I would not play games with your business account at this point.
Yeah, we stress that under normal times is keeping personal and business expenses separately, and it's times like this that really comes home, and you see the importance of it.
Caroline, did you have anything? Caroline or Jill, did you have anything you want to interject here?
Yep, actually, I was just going to cede the floor to Caroline to talk about some other resources that are available.
Thank you, Will and Mason, and Kierstin too, even though she's not on the line anymore. Really helpful. I can do this really fast. I know we're at time. There are some other resources available if you are an artist or an organization. One of those is through Metro Arts called the Thrive program. So we are able to award $500 up to $2,500 for artists or artistic projects for the community. So check that out on our website. There's also just this artistrelief.org was just announced this week. So that's up to $5,000 for artists. Most other cities, if you're not in Nashville specifically, I know most other cities also have emergency funds. So check with your arts council, and there's a few listed here. And also we have on our website at metroartsnashville.com just a resource page, and we're constantly adding things to that. So be sure to check that out. And I know that Jill has one too. So the NEA also recently this week just announced some grants available to organizations up to $50,000. I believe you do have to be a 501c3 for those. Looks like you have a question about Thrive. You do have to be a Nashville, Davidson County resident to apply for the Thrive money. And that is my spiel, but if there's questions, we can answer those, or just feel free to email us also at arts@nashville.gov. Thank you.
Yes, and for folks that are still having trouble navigating these processes, like Will has said many, many times, these are changing very quickly. And I think Kierstin said something last week that these laws were passed in mid to late March, and laws aren't written in a week. So we keep getting guidance and keep getting new updates. So if you are feeling confused, you're not alone, and we'll keep continuing to figure this out together. If you do want additional assistance, we've put up on the slide a couple additional resources that you can go to for either legal or business or other sort of emergency relief help. The first being the Arts and Business Council has a volunteer lawyers and professionals for the arts program that offers free legal and business assistance to income qualified artists and arts organizations. You can find that on our website, www.abcnashville.org, and we can help you get some legal help and navigate a lot of these questions that are coming through the chat. And there's also other, the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee or East Tennessee. There's also the Memphis area legal services for those who are outside of Nashville, Davidson County. Surf Plus is a really great emergency relief organization, as well as the others listed on there. The National Coalition for Arts Preparedness, Arts Ready through South Arts. Americans for the Arts is the national advocacy group for artists and creatives. They have a lot of really great resources on their website. And then the Artists' Rights Alliance is a little bit skewed more towards the music industry, but do a lot of great work for independent contractors and individual artists in the music and arts communities. So thank you for joining us. I know we're a little over time here at 10:03 a.m., but please do keep submitting your questions either through the chat for the next couple of minutes, or feel free to email us at info@abcnashville.org, and we will try to keep handling those. And we'll set up more of these webinars. One thing we didn't really talk about is that there are additional plans for relief, hopefully coming. The CARES Act is phase 3 of some of these federal relief packages. So hopefully there's going to be a phase 4. I don't know if Will or Mason, you can talk any more about those, because I think it's just all hearsay right now. But there should be more information and more relief hopefully coming soon.
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead,
know
Dave.
Congress is trying to get more money into the program because they think they're going to run out at some point.
Jill, thanks so much for letting us speak. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And we expect that if you look at treasury.gov or ask your friends at the Google U.S. Department of Treasury, there's a red bar and it's got guidance. And if you look there, sometime today, they'll probably post information about independent contractors in the PPP. And at that point, your bank should be in a position to be able to figure out what they're looking for, and you can get your application in. That's treasury.gov. Thanks, guys.
So one other thing I just wanted to mention before we log off, we have recorded this session and we will try to get it uploaded on our YouTube page, similar to what we did with last week's session. I know a lot of people have been asking me in private chats whether we're going to share this PowerPoint presentation. That will be included as part of the video recording. And so we'll try to get that up as soon as humanly possible so you all can review this information and go back and take a look at it. I did put back up the slide about which programs are mutually exclusive, but otherwise we'll continue to field questions as we get them. But thank you so much for joining us this morning and stay tuned for more info. Have a great weekend.